from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Thursday night edition of the program, and it's not a throwback. We're live tonight, and our phone number, if you want to join us on our late night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4Valdez. A number of things are going on in the news. There's an investigation underway for the shooting of an airman by deputies. I believe that was in Florida. We'll keep you up to speed on what's going on with that as we get more information on it. That's one of the newest items I've seen in the news. Otherwise, you've probably seen some of the headlines today are continuations from yesterday. The House Republicans are pushing to have a citizenship question on the ballot, on the census, and have moved forward a bill on that. MSNBC has been quite puzzled by a poll finding that independents, right, registered independents, think that Joe Biden is a greater threat to democracy than his opponent, Donald Trump, Donaldus Magnus El Trumpito, the 45th president of these United States. Now, this doesn't surprise me, right? But I think that they are dumbfounded by this because a lot of people believe the hype. And, you know, earlier today I was, not dinner, but I met up with somebody for coffee. Not somebody, a few people. And we were talking, and I think me, you, a few of us, some of us, that gather every day around the radio to have this late night national town hall conversation, we tend to be a little bit more up to speed on what's going on in America at night because we're up and we're paying attention. Doesn't make us better or smarter or anything else better than anybody else. But I think it just gives us a little bit of an edge. And I think that part is important, right? Because something we need to never forget is that the left will weaponize your good nature against you every single time. And that is one of the main things that they do is they weaponize one's good nature, your good heart. They will use that against you. And we see it time and again. And it's sadly, it's a very commonplace tactic. And it's upsetting to me because I think there's so many good people out there. And you start to talk with them and they start to ask you things in a very earnest manner. And you can tell that they mean well, but they have no idea what's going on. And the conversation. And these are people that agree that the border's out of control, that Biden's got to go. They're not sympathetic to Biden at all. But again, people that are busy with life, real life, bills that have to be paid, children that need to be cared for, grandchildren. And they were disagreeing on a topic, but they agreed on this topic. And the topic was things are so bad in Gaza that you've got school kids who don't know much better, that are conducting sit-ins across the country. And I thought to myself, wow, this is effective, right? These college campus Marxist attacks that we've seen across the country, they're serving their purpose. Now, the wife was making one case about we've got to stop with the innocent slaughter of people. The husband was making the case that even Joe Biden had to respond to this and bend a knee to Israel and say, look, I can't send any more arms and we're not sending any more arms and whatever because the people had spoken. And I sat there and said, man, how do I approach this? How do I tell people who don't listen to my show every day so they're not up to speed on all of this stuff that we saw the NYPD saying 87% of the people they, and forgive me if that number's off. I just remember it was a high number, and I read it on the air, but feel free to fact check me on it. But this high percentage of folks that were arrested were not affiliated with any college. In fact, they were probably my age and infiltrating these college campuses. What's that all about, right? So innocent, good people will clearly think that these protests, or what we're calling protests, that we're seeing across the country are actually something that is genuine. And the husband, again, was disagreeing with the wife, but the one thing that they agreed on was that Joe Biden had succumbed to the power of the people, because the people were speaking up with these college protests saying enough is enough, no more slaughter in Gaza. And I thought, man, we're stuck here. And I spent the next, 30 minutes, 40 minutes trying to explain to them how the left weaponizes our goodwill against us without sounding like a tinfoil hat conspiracy crazy, trying to say that, no, you got it all wrong. You're brainwashed. You've been sucked in by the left. I don't want to say all that. I want to validate them and make sure they understand that, these are differences of opinion that I have, and I want to share with you my opinion, and here's why. And it was quite an interesting conversation. And when I left, I think the wife was, scratching her head saying, yeah, you know what, you might have a point. And the husband also, but less so, right? He was just like, you'll never see the truth. But I think he was realizing, maybe I'm not seeing the full side of the story. And listen, it's never lost on me. I never step into any conversation, even the ones here on the radio, even if it comes across as such. I don't really believe I know everything. I am willing to learn something. I am willing to consider the other side and to take on a position that isn't my own and test it against what I believe. And then I can reject it, deny it, disagree with it, whatever. But it's up to me. And I really do try to be fair with these things and objective as I can be. But it hit me so close to home and so realistically that I realized there's so much more work for all of us to do. Right? I'm on the radio, super. We're all out there during the day doing our lives, whether it's driving to work, coming back from work, at the water cooler at work, the coffee machine at work, in the break room at work, whatever it is. We're interacting with people, and we can't all become these activist people because, we have lives and we have things and there's circumstance. So you have to be able to bear your truth as often as you can, in as many places as you can, without making it awkward in many ways, right? Because you don't want to be like, hey, what time is it? Well, the election was stolen, the vaccine kills people, and Trump was right. That would be a difficult way to answer a lot of questions, irrespective of your position on those particular matters. So I think there's a degree of nuance, a degree of finesse that's important when we have such conversations. Because otherwise, then they'll just think, you're just one of those crazy January 6ers, right? That's what they'll label you as. Another very complicated scenario where there was a lot of government intervention to make it look like something that it wasn't. And that seems to be the key lately. There's a lot of things that seem like they are, but they're not. And I want to talk about this battle for reality, or this battle on reality, or better said, this war on truth. And there's a film called The War on Truth. It's a documentary produced by Nick Searcy that I think is important for us to discuss. And I want to do that straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
There is more news in your commentary, in your analysis, than there is on a news network.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
You are suggesting that the violence at the Capitol on January 6th was part of some operation orchestrated by FBI sources or FBI agents. The answer is no, it was not.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
It's not protest. It's insurrection.
When I said how many agents or assets of the government were present on January 5th and January 6th and agitating in the crowd to go into the Capitol and how many went into the Capitol, can you answer that now?
I don't know the answer to that question.
You don't know how many there were or there were none?
I don't know the answer to either of those questions.
I think you may have just perjured yourself that you don't know that there were any.
All right, that is the film The War on Truth by Nick Searcy. He's producer of this documentary. Many of you know him as Art Mullen on the show Justified. Now, he's producer and he stars in this as well, The War on Truth. And he's had a distinguished career in Hollywood, more than 2 decades. Listen to this. He's been in a bunch of different films, big features, independent films. Look at this. He played General Hoyt in Guillermo del Toro's 2018 Best Picture winner, The Shape of Water. He also had a role in several multi-Oscar winning films like 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri. And he also starred and produced the documentary Capital Punishment, Everything They Told You About J6 Was a Lie, which was arguably the most censored American film of 2022. Nick Searcy, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Rich. It's an honor to be here.
Likewise, I'm happy to speak with you tonight because I think this is a topic that we have to talk about often because it's a part of our history, or a future part of our history, and if we don't talk about it, history will be skewed. And lamentably, that's the war on truth that we live in, right? Not to be punny, so to speak, but you've made a documentary on January 6th, very poignantly named Everything They Told You About J6 Was a Lie. Why make another documentary about it?
Well, because it's ongoing, Rich. They haven't stopped. Matthew Graves announced not too long ago that they're going to arrest at least 1,000 more people. And in fact, they've already arrested more people in 2024 than they arrested in 2023. Wow. So this ridiculous oppression is continuing. They're arresting Americans now at the rate of 5 to 7 a week. And these are people that never went in the building. Matthew Graves said out loud, we're now going to start looking at people who never went in the building but simply were around the Capitol building because simply by being there, they had entered a restricted area. Well, in our film, you'll see there were operatives that removed all the signs and the fencing before the crowd came from the ellipse to the Capitol building so that no one knew they were entering a restricted area. It was entrapment. This was a setup, and Christopher Wray is frankly a liar, and so is Merrick Garland.
I don't doubt a lot of the last 2 statements. I don't doubt that Christopher Wray and Merrick Garland are fake, phony frauds. I believe that to be true. What I think what many Americans would want to know is why create such an elaborate setup? What was the benefit?
Well, the benefit was they would tar and feather all Trump supporters, paint them as domestic terrorists, which they have done ever since. But the fact of the matter is only 4 people died that day. All of them were Trump supporters. 2 of them were women killed by the police. And what they really wanted was a bloodbath. They wanted something so horrible, they wanted hundreds of deaths. And they've done this all over the world. They did this in Ukraine. They've done it in other countries as a practice run, and now they're using these tactics on the American people.
And, you know, that's very consistent. I think you're right, by the way. Very consistent with a new poll from PBS News, NPR Marist, that finds that 53% of independent voters believe that Biden's second term will weaken America and further harm democracy. And I think that's important because the left and the Democrats, their mantra has been that it's Donald Trump, it's the Republicans, it's the MAGA crowd that are the threat to democracy. Whereas I think independent voters are now saying something completely different in this poll. And I think that sends a shockwave through the critics of Trump and the enemies of America that are trying to kind of usurp this reality, or like you've really aptly pointed out, to create this war on truth. What do you think is their next step as they realize it's not working. People don't believe them anymore.
Well, frankly, Rich, it is working. I mean, these people are going to jail. I mean, we can sit here and say polls are this and polls are that. I mean, they are destroying these people's lives. And that's what you'll see in the war on truth. We humanize these people that have been demonized by the Biden administration as domestic terrorists, and frankly, demonized by the media. The media has consistently portrayed these people as evil, white supremacists, racist, terrorists, insurrectionists. They've ruined their reputations in their communities. They've caused them to lose their businesses. Many of them find themselves unemployable now because even when they fill out an application at a Burger King, the first thing that comes up is that they were charged by the FBI. So they are systematically destroying these people. The people that are taking plea deals, pleading to felonies, they can't vote anymore. They're taking these people off the table. And by doing so, they're also sending a message to the rest of America. If you resist us, this will happen to you. And so it's a campaign of fear and intimidation as well. And that's why they're continuing to do it. Nothing can stop them because they're doing it all in the District of Columbia, where they have total control over everything, over the juries, over the judges, over the prosecutors.
Well, Nick Searcy, you make an excellent point, and I think you're correct, and I agree with that 100%, that this is working. And as you were saying it, what was ringing in my mind was Matthew Perna, who took his own life because this got to him, and the pressure was too much. And it makes me think, who's next, and how much more pressure are we going to put on these people for, until we get to that point? And I hope we don't. I hope it doesn't happen to anybody else. But you're right, this has been a relentless campaign.
Well, it was announced today that another man, a 55-year-old man, took his own life, who was being charged. And
I wasn't even aware of that.
There have been, yes, I'm sad to say I don't have his name, right in front of me. But yes, a man today, it was announced, he killed himself because they were about to accuse him of assaulting a police officer, which would add a terrorism charge to his case and probably make him go to jail for 8 to 10 years. So this is what they're doing to people. There's so many cases in my movie that show how they overcharge these people and they bleed them dry. They don't give them due process. They hold them in the gulag for over 2 years in many cases, sometimes almost 3. And these are not people that are able to mount a vigorous defense. They don't have $200,000 laying around that they can give to a lawyer. So they basically force these people to plead to one charge. And then they parade around and go, see, we got another one. We got another one. He pled guilty. This is their game. This is what they're doing. Right. And they're doing it to serve their narrative, and they're not going to stop.
Folks, we are on with Nick Searcy. He's a producer of the documentary, The War on Truth. He's an actor. You probably know him as Art Mullen from the show Justified. And he's been in a number of Hollywood films. We're going to continue discussing The War on Truth, his latest documentary film about January 6th. And we're going to find out, what the reason is behind why the January 6th footage was withheld for as long as it was and only released very sporadically just recently. We're going to talk about that and more straight ahead. So don't go anywhere. Again, our guest, Nick Searcy. And our phone number, if you want to join us, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere. Coming right back.
Glad to be on your show, Rich. It's just an amazing broadcast that I hope the rest of America listens to every day.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Welcome back, familia. Thank you, amigos. And listen, so many Americans have been told that January 6th was a violent insurrection against the United States by a group of angry fringe MAGA supporters. But as we've discussed on this program, what if it wasn't? What if the reason the January 6th footage was withheld was because they wanted to keep it a secret for years, and because the topic was censored mainly because there's so much more to the story? what if there's actually a war on truth? Well, that's part of the blurb I'm looking at for this film, The War on Truth. And we have the producer of that film on the line. Nick Searcy's an actor, likely known from the show Justified. And Nick Searcy, what is your thought on this, on why they cherry-picked the footage? And I think it's an obvious answer, but they cherry-picked the footage to kind of tell their story, and then so much of it that tells the rest of the story was kind of hidden and buried.
Well, they're liars. They have a narrative that they want to push, and so they can't allow any evidence that disproves their narrative. And it's easily disproven. The reason they're withholding the footage is because it shows that in many cases, the Capitol Police were the aggressors here. The Capitol Police fired into a peaceful crowd that was singing hymns and chanting and saying the Pledge of Allegiance. They fired into the middle of the crowd, which drove them forward and enraged them. They also, and you can see this in our film, they targeted women relentlessly. Victoria White was beaten 42 times when she was in the tunnel with a baton for no reason except to enrage the crowd. Ronald Colton McAbee, who was sentenced to almost 9 years, was trying to give resuscitation to Roseanne Boylan, who was being crushed by the crowd and then was being beaten by Capitol Policewoman Lila Morris on the head while she laid on the ground. You can see this in our film. They were doing this intentionally to enrage the crowd. And I often think, I was there that day. I didn't happen to be in an area where these things were happening. But I often think sometimes that if I had been in these men's position, I would have done the same thing. I mean, the people that went to Washington that day were not going to stand around and watch these people be beaten for no reason.
Nick, did you get locked up for being down there?
No, I didn't, and not. They're still arresting people, so it could happen.
So not yet is the answer, right?
Yeah,
hopefully
not. But I was there. I like I said, I wound up on the Supreme Court side of the Capitol building, which was a fairly peaceful side. There wasn't much happening over there. All of the fracas was on the other side, and for whatever reason, I wound up on that side. So I didn't even know it had happened. That was part of the reason I made the first movie, Capital Punishment, is that I went there that day and I saw a bunch of people singing and praying and singing hymns and saying the Pledge of Allegiance and praying for the country. And when I got home that night and saw what was on television, all I saw was this window breaking and this violence that I didn't see one bit of that. And, they make it look like there weren't 1.5 to 2 million people there. There were only a few hundred crazy MAGA people who were trying to hurt the police, and that's just a total lie.
Folks, we're on with Nick Searcy. He is the producer of the film The War on Truth. And this film really pulls back the curtain on what January 6th really was with actual evidence. In the documentary, he talks with various witnesses that provide video evidence and ask the very tough questions that many of us want to know. And honestly, would you say that irrespective of how people feel about President Trump or the politics of the day, that this is still something that they should watch and they'd benefit from?
Well, the biggest challenge is to get somebody on the left to watch a film that might contradict what they've been told by their television set. I mean, they have been so heavily propagandized. In fact, in Hollywood, I had an agent, and when I made Capital Punishment, I asked him what he thought of it, and he told me flat out that he was not going to watch it, that what I'd made was propaganda, and that was an insurrection, and everybody that went to Washington that day should go to jail. And I said, well, okay, I guess you don't want to be my agent then, so you're fired.
Oh, so you fired him. I thought he was going to fire you.
No,
interesting how that goes.
He said, well, when I fired him, he said, well, that's your decision. I still respect your work. And I said, well, Dan, you can't have me as a client if you're not even going to watch my work. But that is typical of what you get from the left. They're afraid to look at it. They won't consider that they might be wrong, because then everything starts to crumble. If it's proven that they were lied to about the insurrection, then everything starts to fall apart. The COVID nonsense, everything starts to crumble. So they're afraid to watch it.
Unbelievable. Folks, again, Nick Searcy is the producer of The War on Truth. And everybody thinks that this was an insurrection, although there were no guns, and it was not designed to be an insurrection. They didn't try to overthrow the government. If anything, it was a peaceful protest gone wrong because of just lots of agitators in the crowd. And ultimately, what's your goal with getting people to watch this film? What are you hoping they take away from it?
I want them to see who these people are that they're oppressing. I want them to see. That's what we do quite effectively over and over again, is we show that these are decent people, in many cases American heroes. There's a man named Chris Kane, who was a Marine veteran, who actually gave the orders for the honor guard at Ronald Reagan's funeral. And he was there that day, and he committed no act of violence. He helped somebody up off the ground, and they are putting him in jail.
Wow.
A man named Ronald Colton Maccabee, who is the man I mentioned before, who actually you can hear on tape Capitol police officers thanking Ronald Maccabee for helping them. They were being crushed by the crowd. Maccabee helped them up. He also tried to administer CPR to Roseanne Boylan, but because he had on motorcycle gloves, he was charged with assault with a deadly weapon, because he used his motorcycle gloves to pick a Capitol policeman up off the ground and help him to his feet. This is the kind of thing that's going on. And Ronald Colton Maccabee went to trial. He was able to tell his story in the trial. They watched the footage of him trying to resuscitate Roseanne Boylan. They heard the officer thank him, and the jury convicted him in less than 2 hours, because they do not have a chance in the D.C. juries. That's why there's no change of venue has ever been granted to a January 6th defendant. They want them tried in the District of Columbia because they know they will get a guilty verdict.
Folks, we're on with Nick Searcy. We're coming right back. We're going to wrap this up. The film is The War on Truth. Make sure you check it out.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. I had somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So they say it was an insurrection. Many people that believe that January 6th was nothing more than a peaceful protest gone wrong are called conspiracy theorists. And it's the belief of many that the whole thing was instigated. This movie tells us the truth of what really happened on January 6th. The film, The War on Truth, the producer, Nick Searcy. Nick, in the moments that we have remaining, I want you to leave an impression on the listeners of what they can expect when they watch the film.
Well, you're going to see things that you're not going to see anywhere else. You'll see that Ray Epps, who's been the subject of a lot of discussion about who he was and who he worked for, there was at the first breach at the Capitol, he was at the barricades, and as soon as that first barricade was breached, a flare went up from one side of the crowd, and then 8 men came and got Ray Epps and marched him out of that crowd, got him out of there before the Capitol Police started firing on the crowd. I've never seen that before in any other film, but it's in our film. And you'll also hear Tariq Johnson, who was a Capitol policeman that day, talk about how he, on his own volition, cleared the House and Senate, is calling his superiors saying, we've got to get these Congress people out of here, because if the people who have come into the Capitol come into this chamber, there's probably going to be bloodshed because the police will have to open fire. And he got no response because, frankly, they wanted that to happen. They wanted hundreds dead. They wanted a bloodbath that they could then blame on Trump and everybody who supported him. That's the kind of thing you're going to see in the War on Truth.
Wow. Now, for people who want to watch the film, what is the best way for them to watch the film?
The two best ways to watch it are thewarontruthmovie.com. That's a website that we've set up. The trailer is there. It'll show you how to order a DVD and how to watch the film online. And you can also, if you're a subscriber at Salem Now is going to have the movie as well. And that starts on May 17th. SalemNow.com and thewarontruthmovie.com.
Now, for anybody who wants to follow you online for your social media commentary and everything that you're working on, how do they follow you?
I'm on Twitter or X or whatever it is at Yes Nick Searcy, YES Nick Searcy. And just a warning, I tend to say some bad words here and there. My mother's very ashamed of my Twitter account.
That's great. Nick Searcy, tell everybody one more time the website for the film.
thewarontruthmovie.com and salemnow.com. That's the best places to find it.
Well, sir, I appreciate everything that you're doing and for staying up late and telling us your story. You are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Keep fighting the good fight. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me, Rich. Thank you.
You bet. All right, amigos, we continue with your calls, your comments, a few more stories that I want to tell you, and more straight ahead. Here's the number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Another thing interesting in this polling was more independents said that they worry about President Biden weakening democracy than Trump, 53% to 42%. What do you make of this?
I find it shocking, honestly. I can't, make sense of that number. I wish I could. I wish I could have some really great insight to it. But I don't know if it's an outlier or not, because the other numbers with independents and Biden are going in the right direction. So that may be it. But also, just one thing I wanted to add on to what Basil said. This trial's not on TV. You guys do a great job reporting what's happening. But if there aren't those images coming out of the courthouse, people feel like they know this story. We've heard about it for a long time, so it doesn't surprise me that they're not interested.
Well, there you have it. That is the reaction from the decision desk at MSNBC. You were listening to Susan Del Percio. She's a political analyst on MSNBC, and having a conversation with Ana Cabrera. And the two of them are it's really refreshing to see them be honest, right? And I hate to paint with a broad brush, but I will in the case of MSNBC. And the reason why, because you know what? They're both, I believe both of these women, I believe them when they say they really can't understand these polls. And the reason they can't is because they live in a bubble. The bubble they live in is the one where I'm never sitting next to them on this panel, right? They never have somebody from conservative talk radio. Imagine that. What a robust conversation we would have if she said, I would really love, let me see where she said it right here. She said, I wish I could have some really great insight into it. I would give her tons of insight. I'd say, hey, you want to get some insight from a Puerto Rican kid from Brooklyn who does conservative talk radio? Sure, here you go. I'd give her all sorts of perspective into it and explain to her why we think that President Trump's America First agenda is a good idea. Why having a strong national defense is a good idea. Why reducing spending is a good idea. Why inflation and massive spending and all this pork barrel stuff that's coming out of Washington is bad for America. Why a departure from our founding documents and what America was founded on is detrimental to where we're headed, right? We can't really have much of a future if we depart so drastically from what we're supposed to be as a nation, right? A virtuous people that live in this best experiment for liberty that has ever existed on any part of God's green earth. It's horrible what's happening right now. But this is where we are. So clearly, they don't have this insight. And I would love to give them some insight on it. I really, really would. The problem is, their producers, their network, whoever it is, they don't want to hear the other side of the story. They don't want to have that debate or even conversation, right? I'm not here to beat people up. I think I'm pretty fair most of the time. If I were on TV with these women, I would have a discussion with them and I would share my perspective. Sometimes that's all you need to do is for people to see it, incarnate, right? They need to see you and feel you and realize, wow, you're a real person. And you know what? What you're saying makes sense. It makes sense to me. I see now why you like Trump. Because to me, this is way bigger than liking Trump. And that's where I think they lose it because they're like, oh, I just can't see how you like Trump. It's not about liking Trump. It's about loving America. And he happens to have policies that benefit America. So why wouldn't I support him? And that's the bottom line. And that they drastically and consistently miss. And it's a shame. It really is. Now, where'd it go? That disappeared. And there was one more that I wanted to play for you because I think it's funny. You've got Hillary Clinton. She was on The Morning Joke, and she says that Trump is old and dangerous. Listen to this one.
And, when people ask me about the Biden-Trump race, my answer is very clear. We have two old candidates. One is, yes, old and effective, has passed legislation that I think is going to put America on such a strong footing for the future, is compassionate, cares about people, tries hard to make the right decision, and they are complicated. The other is old and dangerous. I mean, why is that a hard choice for people?
So that is, of course, Hillary Clinton. Now, what's funny is, as far as I understand it, Hillary Clinton is 76 years old and Donald Trump is 77 years old. So she's saying that he's old and dangerous. He's literally a year older than her. I mean, 6 months if you really want to split hairs here or whatever. I think the whole thing is just kind of crazy. Hillary Clinton sounds like a sore loser. And by the way, that old man spanked you, right? Didn't he? I'm old enough to remember a race between Hillary Clinton and Donaldus Magnus El Trompito, the 45th president of these United States. And let me tell you, even me, right? I was like, man, I like Trump. And a buddy of mine called me from, I think he was at the Hilton in New York, and he said, listen, I'm at the Trump party. And I said, man, I hope he wins, but I don't think that's going to happen. I'm going to sleep. And when I saw it happen, when I saw the Democrats melting down, I was just as happy and surprised as Trump himself was. So I think he also didn't expect it. And I think he thought the deep state was going to try and interfere as best they could. And when he won, I was so happy. I can't remember the last time I was that happy. Anyway, folks, hour number 2 is coming up straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
From the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Your liberty-loving Latino amigo, happy to be here with you this Thursday night, hour number 2 of our program. If you want to join us on our late-night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-4825-337, 833-4-Valdez. And plenty of news out there tonight. In addition to the polls that are out there, and we're going to get to those in a moment, you've got the CNN fact checkers are coming to the defense of George Soros. I'll get into that a little bit more maybe at the top of the next hour. And there's all this focus on what's happening internationally that people seem to forget all of the woes that are going on right here inside the United States, like inflation, like the border, like rising crime. And all of these things seem to be overshadowed by what was a couple of weeks ago. Ukraine is in the recent days, what's going on with Israel and Hamas. And while those issues are important, and they're very important, nothing takes the place of what's happening in your own backyard. But this is where the focus has been. And all you've got to do is listen to what some of the crazy lefties are talking about. And when I think of crazy lefties, only a handful of people come to mind, right? AOC, all out crazy, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, my least favorite congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens, and her communist sympathizing grandpa, Bernie Sanders. Now, Bernie Sanders was on CNN yesterday, and he says he's worried that Biden will lose the election over Israel. Listen to this.
You know, you are so connected with young voters, with progressive voters. You're a champion for them. Do you think that President Biden could lose the election over this?
Well, that's what I worry about. Look, I think Biden has a lot of accomplishments. And the point that I would make and have made before, Joe Biden is not running against God. He's not running against the perfect candidate. He's running against the guy named Donald Trump, the most dangerous president in the history of this country. So what I would say to young people and all Americans, if you believe in the foundations of American democracy, you cannot vote for Trump, who's undermining democracy.
That is AOC's communist sympathizing grandpa, Bernie Sanders. Now, while he thinks Trump is the most dangerous president to ever exist, Trump has his own thoughts about what's going on with Biden. And he also thinks that what Biden is doing with respect to Israel is disgraceful. Look at that. When Trump and Bernie Sanders agree on trashing Joe El Baboso Biden. Listen to this.
What Biden is doing with respect to Israel is disgraceful. If any Jewish person voted for Joe Biden, they should be ashamed of themselves. He's totally abandoned Israel, and nobody can believe it. I guess he feels good about it because he did it as a political decision. You have to do the right decision, not the political decision. But he did a very bad thing.
He did a very bad thing, and that is 100% right. Now, there's a lot going on here. Obviously, today, Netanyahu has made a statement, and he makes his statement with respect to standing alone if he has to stand alone, because the United States is obviously withholding weapons aid that we would normally supply our allies with. And I was going to wait a little while to play this before we bring in our guest, but I want to kind of set the stage with all of this here because I think all of it plays into the poll numbers. Listen to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
אנחנו יותר חזקים, אנחנו נחושים, אנחנו מאוחדים כדי להביס את אויבינו, את מבקשי נפשנו. אם נצטרך לעמוד לבד, נעמוד לבד. אמרתי כבר שאם צריך נילחם בציפורניים, אבל יש לנו הרבה יותר מאשר ציפורניים. ובאותן תעצומות נפש, בעזרת השם, יחד ננצח.
We are stronger, we are determined, and we are united to defeat our enemy and those who seek our souls. If we have to stand alone, we will stand alone. I have already said that if we have to, we will fight with our nails. We have much more than our nails. And with the same greatness of spirit, with God's help, we will win together. That's Benjamin Netanyahu. And all of this goes into what makes up these polls, right? And there's a poll. There's a poll we were talking about before. Maybe we'll bring it up again, which is this poll of independents by Marist NPR, finding 53% of independents believe that Biden's second term will weaken America, while only 42% believe that Trump would further harm democracy. And, of course, our friends at MSNBC felt that this was shocking and they couldn't relate. You heard that clip. Maybe I'll play it again later. But I didn't find it shocking because there's plenty of us that understand why things are working in Trump's favor, not the least of which is President Trump's pollster, John McLaughlin. Now, in addition to being President Trump's pollster, John McLaughlin's one of the best pollsters ever. He just tends to nail it, and he knows what he's doing. He's the CEO and partner of McLaughlin and Associates, and I'm happy to have him on the show tonight. John McLaughlin, welcome back.
Thanks, Rich. Great to be here.
So I put a lot out there because I really wanted to set the stage that way, because I feel like a lot of these polls are being impacted by the people that are most critical of Biden right now, which tend to be those that support Trump, and lately those that support AOC's communist sympathizing grandpa, Bernie Sanders. Right? It seems like he's losing support on the left. He's getting everybody angry, and now he's maybe trying to gain some sympathy from them by slowing down aid. Talk to us, John McLaughlin.
Well, Biden's losing support because the top issue is the economy. It's inflation in the United States. And if you go to a supermarket, if you try to pay a rent or a mortgage, or if you go buy gas, you're mad at Biden because you know you were better off when Donald Trump was president than you are now today. And then you have an out-of-control border that's contributing to the perception that crime is on the rise, because it is. And then you have he's so weak he can't end these wars. People want the war in Ukraine to end. They want Israel was attacked. And by the way, I have a really unique perspective because from 2003 until the last election in 22, I polled for Netanyahu. So I was polling for Trump and Netanyahu in 16 and in 2020, et cetera, and through the last election in 22. So what's sad about what's going on right now with Israel, they had this happen in 2014 when they discovered the tunnels going from Gaza, where the United States gave the Palestinians, there's only a couple of million people in Gaza, but they gave them billions of dollars for schools and hospitals, and they ended up building terror tunnels, which are like a mini subway system that go miles into Israel. And I've been in the tunnels, like in 2016, one of the tunnels they found. It's all concrete, solid concrete. There's water, there's internet, there's electricity. It goes through and it goes for miles under Israel. These terrorists can, they could bring a nuclear weapon in there if they wanted to and wipe out Israel. And the Israelis didn't have the technology to get in 2014, and they got it like 35 of the tunnels in 2014, and then Obama made Netanyahu, it was the same kind of thing. He made them force them into a ceasefire before they got all the tunnels. And he told them they weren't going to give them any weapons. And now Biden's taking a page out of that, where, Congress, the Democrats in Congress did a deal with the Republicans where, okay, we'll give this to Israel, but you got to help us and give us weapons for Ukraine. And they did that.
Wow.
And Biden was part of it. He signed it into law. He got what he wanted for Ukraine. Now he's holding up the weapons that Israel needs to defend themselves from these Iran-backed terrorists that are in Gaza. And, it's like telling the Americans, like, you can't get bin Laden. You can't get Al-Qaeda.
What's interesting. Sure, John, and I just wanted to chime in and say, I feel like there's a big push to focus on what's going on overseas and try to make Biden look like some sort of foreign policy champ. But really all it is to take away the spotlight, to distract from how poorly he's doing domestically on the economy, with inflation in particular and immigration right behind it.
Yeah, when you look at what's going on right now, it's Biden's. I mean, the biggest diversion is the court case in New York, where people are seeing this, where Trump, his only crime that he's committed is ahead in the polls. And he's been leading Biden ever since Biden surrendered Afghanistan. And what you have is a situation. You can go to the Real Clear Politics website, all these media polls. They have Trump ahead. We never saw this in 2016. In 2016, when we won, it was an electoral state victory where we were going to win certain battleground states, have enough electoral votes. We'd lost the popular vote by 3%. And then in 2020, we only lost the 3 states we needed to win by 44,000 votes. And there were a lot of questions about how those drop boxes and absentee ballots were placed. And a lot of the election laws have been fixed since then. But now we're ahead in the national popular vote. Like our poll that's posted on our website on McLaughlinOnline.com, Trump's leading Biden 49-45. And, we're winning a quarter of the black vote. We're winning Hispanics. In fact, there's roughly 4 to 5% of the electorate voted for Biden in 2020 is now voting for Trump. And they're a quarter black, quarter Hispanic. Their average age is 35. And, they're young voters, and they're really disillusioned with, what they were promised under Biden and what they've gotten instead. So, and now you're seeing a situation where even these college students at the best universities in the country, where they or their parents, they're paying tens of thousands of dollars in tuition and, room and board, maybe $100,000 a year. So they're not having graduations. And they didn't have graduations during COVID. And but the real kicker is, if you talk to the students, they're not getting the jobs, the high-paying jobs they thought they would get. High-tech companies are laying off. Other companies just aren't hiring. They're not finding the kind of, economy that Biden says, Bidenomics is working, et cetera. So in our polls, when we asked them, is the economy getting better or worse? 64% said worse, only 31 better. And 88%, it was 80, the 86% said they've been negatively impacted by inflation, 48% to the point where they're having trouble making, ends meet. And then they're seeing all this time and effort going into the persecution of Donald Trump, where when we asked them, is politics playing a role? 66% of all voters said politics is playing a role. 56% said Biden played a role. 54% to 36%, they say there's a double standard of justice. The Bidens go free, Trump gets prosecuted. 56 to 35, they say let the voters decide, not the courts. And 53% of all voters say that Biden's trying to stop Trump from becoming president by trying to put him in jail, and only 34% disagree with that. So it's really scary what's going on in America right now, where Joe Biden is so corrupt, so desperate, that he put in place a strategy to indict his opponent last year. Right. There's proof of coordination with the White House on all these indictments. Colangelo in New York.
Well, before we get into that, John McLaughlin, hang on right there. I'm going to take a pause here because I wanted to dig into that with you, because we've seen this collusion everywhere, from Funny Willis all the way through Colangelo in New York. It's all over the place, and I want to get into that and the voter gender gap as well. Folks, we're on with the pollster of all pollsters, John McLaughlin. McLaughlin Associates is his company. We're coming right back. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, we're back, and we continue our discussion on what's going on in America at night, in particular, the 2024 election, and we've got President Trump's pollster, John McLaughlin, on the line. And one of the things I want to talk about, and there's plenty, right? We're talking about the election interference that's been going into slowing down the campaign. John McLaughlin, we were right before the pause, we talked about, you mentioned something I thought was very, very important, which is the whether it's Colangelo or other people that have been kind of injected into this persecution of Trump to try and pull it off. And thankfully, because of the expert and prowess of his legal team, he's been able to kind of fight them off. But it's, in my opinion, a large degree of this is that people are finally saying, you know what, that's wrong. And we're going to stick up for what we believe is true. And I think that's why he's doing so well in the polls. What's your take?
Well, it's worse than that in that when they see what they're doing to Donald Trump, they say if they can do this to Donald Trump, they could do it to any American.
Of course.
And President Trump is meeting this with dignified defiance, where I often say, excuse me, he's going to end up like Nelson Mandela, where people will rally to him because he's being persecuted this way. So anyway, but Colangelo is a prime example. The guy was number 3 in the Biden Justice Department, takes a demotion to be an assistant district attorney in New York because Cyrus Vance said they couldn't bring the case. Bragg said he couldn't bring the case. All of a sudden, Biden sends his number 3 guy from the Justice Department, from Merrick Garland's place, to be an assistant district attorney, precisely to indict and prosecute Trump on a law that's there's never been a case where anybody's been indicted or convicted of this felony before. So it's just absolute political persecution. And, you see with Fani Willis, where she's going to the White House to meet, the vice president, and her boyfriend was going to the White House for 8-hour meetings. And Merrick Garland, he brought Jack Smith in after the New York Times reported Biden pressured Garland precisely to get indictments on Trump. So now you're seeing the cases fall apart because it's all political.
Now let's talk about, I think you're right, and I'm glad that that's happening because people see right through that stuff. Talk to us a little bit about the gender gap, right? Because this has been a big thing.
Right.
Or I should say, set the stage a little bit for it, because I want you to be able to take your time with it, and we probably have about a minute and a half to go before the music kicks in and kicks us out of here. But just to give the little background on this gender gap that we're talking about is the spread, right, between winning men versus winning women, right? Reagan won men 62% to 38%, and the question is, how is Trump going to win? The argument that's being made here is that this is actually a bigger problem for Biden than it is for Trump. So give me the 30-second version, and then we'll come back and unpack it.
Well, what it is I mean, Reagan, I used to work for Arthur Finkelstein, who was one of Reagan's pollsters.
Wow.
So Reagan didn't do as well as, with men, with women as he did with men, but he buried Walter Mondale with both genders when they talked about it. But Trump is doing better. He wins married men, married women.
Hang on right there, John McLaughlin. Catch your breath. Don't worry about it. We're coming right back. Folks, we're on with John McLaughlin, pollster to President Donald Trump, and we're coming right back. 833-482-5337.
Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
I'm going to vote for Trump if he runs, because I feel like it was much better when he was here financially for everybody. Not just me, for everybody.
I'm definitely voting for Donald Trump. He made sure we had money in our pockets. He was for the people. He made sure we had what we needed. I feel like everything will go back to how it was. I mean, ever since he's been out of office, everything's declined.
When Trump was president, my life was good. Economical-wise, I was doing so much better.
They're saying it's going to be Biden-Trump, so who will you vote for?
Oh, I ain't gonna lie, I'm gonna have to go for Trump. Sorry.
I'm going to go for Trump. Trump. Always Trump. Here, let me see. Who are you voting for? Trump.
All right. That is a clip from Newsmax TV of black voters in the Bronx being interviewed with respect to the 2024 election. And I think this gives credence to this article in the New York Post by John McLaughlin, op-ed written by John McLaughlin. Voter gender gap is a bigger issue for Biden than it is for Trump. John McLaughlin, welcome back.
Well, it's great to be back, but I'll tell you, the thing, back in the 2020 election, we won among men. Trump won 53-45. Among women, Biden won 57-42. But the big difference now is Trump has widened his lead with men, where he's up, where it's up by like 14 points, 54 to 41, or so it's up 6 points since then. And the gender gap among women is actually only 4 points now. It's 44 to 48. So Biden's ahead, but 4 points, but not like he won by 15 in 2020. And the difference is we're now ahead with married women. We've closed the gap with single women, and we're doing well with that clip you played. Those are voters in the Bronx. And you know the Bronx. I know the Bronx.
That's right.
President Trump wants to have a rally in the Bronx. So it's like we're the working class voters. That's the bigger problem for Biden right now, where he's been losing what I call safety moms to Trump, who are concerned about crime, immigration, et cetera. And that's closing the gender gap. But we were always doing better with working class women. And now all of a sudden is the college moms are coming back to us because they're seeing these protests on the campus, and they don't like Hamas and terrorism and stuff. They're worried about their kids. And if you happen to be Jewish, so in key states like what's really interesting, last month Siena had Trump, even though we lost 61-38 in New York in 2020, where we really didn't try. This last Siena poll had Trump within 10 points. And they didn't ask it with RFK in it. RFK may make the ballot. And in New Jersey, there was an Emerson poll out yesterday that with RFK in the race at 8%, Trump was behind Biden by only 5 points, 41 to 36. So, where you got significant Jewish voters in New York and New Jersey, you now have a close race for Donald Trump in two unexpected states.
Let me tell you, this has got to be one of the most exciting times to watch this stuff unfold because there's so many interesting moving parts, right? Anyway, folks, John McLaughlin, pollster to President Trump, because he is on top of this stuff. And honestly, I can't remember a time where we've seen so many interesting, and when I say interesting, I mean, unusual suspects, right? The usual suspects usually go in one direction or the other, but to see black men, Hispanic men, to see the growth with women that they said he'll never reach women, I find it just so interesting, John McLaughlin, don't you?
Yeah, and it's because of the failure of Joe Biden. In fact, the liberals have focused on 7 battleground states. The Trump campaign just released one of our polls the other day where Minnesota, Trump's beating Biden 49-46. And in Virginia, we're within 3 points of Biden. That's a state we lost by 10 points. But Kennedy's getting 8%, and we're trailing 40-37. So Virginia being back in play, and Minnesota definitely in play. When you look at that, I mean, President Trump can he can break the usual electoral map and turn it into a bit of a rout, maybe, possibly, what's going on right now.
Outstanding. Now, John McLaughlin, as we move forward towards the finish line, I mean, we're 6 months, a little less than 6 months, I guess, at this point, away from Election Day. How do you think this whole thing unfolds? And I don't mean like winning and losing, but do you see it closing in? Do you have a handicap number for how it ends up?
Well, those of us who are old enough to remember Reagan, at some point, Reagan, remember, he was polarizing. For every favorable, he had an unfavorable. He was too old. He was too right-wing. He was going to blow up the world. And you know what happened? Jimmy Carter failed. Iran was making a fool of him with the hostages. The economy had high inflation. The country was in decline. And guess what? The minute Reagan debated him in October, the polls just snapped and Reagan won in a landslide. So right now, Joe Biden's negatives, I mean, we have him 56% disapprove. Other polls have him higher, like 60% disapprove. You can't have 2/3 of the voters saying the country's on the wrong track and disapproving the job the president's doing and expect him to get reelected. So unless Biden does something to really turn things around in America, to make, to end inflation, to end the wars in Israel and, with Gaza and the Middle East, where, by the way, the way you end the war in Gaza is you get Hamas to surrender. This is crazy because there's Americans being held hostage, not just Israelis, and Biden not getting them out. So what you do is you tell them to surrender, or you let Israel do what they have to do, because they're terrorists. And but Biden's incapable of doing that. He's too weak. Iran's got him compromised. Iran's get a nuclear weapon. But Biden would have to do something to beat the terrorists in the Middle East. Do something to get Putin to stop the war, not just continually sending money and not being able to get Putin to stop. And then, seal the border. The border's out of control. And I don't see him being able to do it.
Do you see any changes on the economy that work to Biden's favor?
Well, I listen to people like Larry Kudlow and Steve Forbes, and they're good friends, and Steve Moore. And, they're talking about inflation's going to go up. And as you drive around, all of a sudden the price of gas is going back up. We're headed back towards $4 a gallon. It used to be $2 a gallon when Trump was president. Mortgage interest rates are going up. And it used to be what was, $1,300 a month for a mortgage payment. It's now $2,300 a month and $2,400 a month. People can't afford that. Rents are going up. It's just, Biden's got to figure out some way that he's got to, get some fiscal discipline back. He seems to every problem he has, he wants to spend money. You keep spending money that you don't have, you're gonna cause inflation. And the other part is his solution is to raise taxes. If he ends the Trump tax cuts, we'll have a major recession with businesses shutting down. And look at Detroit. Yesterday, General Motors said they're going to end production of one of the cars that was the Camaro's already not being produced anymore. But they were going to end one of their class, the Malibu or whatever car is going to stop being produced. Well, if you're not making cars, everything Trump said about Detroit is true. He's shutting down the auto industry in America. So we're going to lose manufacturing and jobs to China for these electric cars or Mexico, et cetera. And the American consumers, they're not ready to accept cars where you go for a couple hundred miles and then all of a sudden you got to recharge it, and they have less of a distance in the winter. And what are you going to do with the trucking business, et cetera? I mean, so he's really, in 2021, in February of 2021, I met with President Trump, went through a poll with him and said, 2/3 of the Republicans want you to run again. And Biden's going to fail. As Biden fails, like Jimmy Carter, they'll want you back. I just never thought the guy was going to fail the way he has.
Yeah. John McLaughlin, I want to thank you for being with us. Let everybody know how they can keep up to speed with you, how they can follow you and find out what's going on.
Well, we post our poll results on McLaughlinOnline.com. So the national polls I was referring to, they're on McLaughlinOnline.com. And my Twitter handle is JMCLGHLN. So at JMCLGHLN. Took the vowels out of the last name. So anyway, but thank you, Rich. I appreciate it.
I also appreciate it. John McLaughlin, everybody. John, you're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Godspeed to you, sir.
And we're from the Bronx,
Well, that's it, right? New York, baby, in the building. All right, brother. Thanks again. God bless. Keep up the good work. Folks, go ahead.
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. And we're coming right back with the rest of your calls. Then it's Open Phone America at the top of the hour. Don't go anywhere. You don't want to miss it.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. No hair, no care, and live on the air. It's Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
It was 9% when I came to office. 9%.
Inflation was actually 1.4% when Biden was sworn in, peaking at 9.1% in June 2022. It has since come down to 3.5%, preventing a further drop housing costs. In New York City, one survey found rent is rising 7 times faster than wages. In California, a condo in West Hollywood just sold for a record-smashing $24 million. Food costs also playing a role. Grocery prices are up 26% since 2019. And fast food prices are up 33%. Many consumers saying enough is enough.
I don't mean to be broke, but for an 8-count mini and a lemonade, $14?
I joked that this was fine dining now because I might as well go at a sit-down restaurant and be served if I'm going to pay those type of prices.
Well, folks, I want to hear your inflation stories. That was a clip from ABC News today, fact-checking Biden's claim in his CNN interview that inflation was at 9% when he came into office. That we know is wrong. It's a lie. Inflation was at 1.4% when he came into office. That was what it was. And honestly, throughout the entire Trump administration, I think it fluctuated between a 1.25 and 1.4. It was always lower than 2% as far as I remembered. Yet Biden seems to make up his own version of the truth. I want to get to your calls and more on all of this stuff. Let's see. Where do we go here? We've got calls from all over. And, of course, Open Phone America is starting momentarily, but we're going to be taking your calls on this stuff right now. Let's see. Here we go. Jim. I don't know if it's Pequot or Pequot Lakes, Minnesota, KNSI. Go right ahead.
Can you hear me okay? I'm driving, so I've got you on
That's fine.
speakerphone.
Just say what you got to say, Jim.
Okay. I had a theory from day one of Biden's inauguration of what was going to happen to him before his first term ended. I thought at first that they would impeach him, but then they would have to admit that they were wrong for letting him get elected. So that I threw that out the window. Second, I thought by the midterm elections that he would garner some quote-unquote debilitating disease that would linger in him in a hospital for 3 to 4 months before he passed away. And then they would use that as their excuse to kind of bring the country together around the death of a president. And my third option was, and I think this is going to possibly happen. I hope it doesn't. I hope nothing happens to the poor old fool, because that's what he is. He's a poor old fool that's being taken advantage of. I think they're going to, before the election, and I think it's going to have to happen soon for them to put their plan in place. I think they've got a plan to take him out, assassinate him by some quote-unquote mega Republican Trump supporter, because that would accomplish 2 things. It would get him out of office. I don't know how exactly they would do the paperwork or what they would do with Kamala Harris as president. They could kick her out after a short time as well. But then they could also fight the gun laws or enact the gun laws they're trying to. So I'd like your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't think it happens, honestly. I really don't. I'm willing to take the bet. I'm not that I have any confidence, right? I can't say that's absolutely not happening. It's totally possible what you're saying. I just don't think it's the case. I think if there was a massive plan, just like the lots of people who believe Michelle Obama was going to be ushered in at some point. I've never believed that. And that one I could confidently say I knew was not going to happen, because everything is just simple. In my opinion, it's simple in life. All right, when you look at what Biden's being investigated for, he's under investigation for making money, selling influence, and spreading it amongst his family. All that tells me is that his family literally is part of his gravy train. And that alone tells me they need him alive, they need him in office. That's big, right? Back in the days, I grew up in Brooklyn, and not that this was a thing, but there were still gangsters when I was a kid. And I remember, watching the news about the killing of Paul Castellano at the Sparks Steakhouse and all that. And I can tell you, back in those days, things were just a little bit different, right? People cared. It was always the reason the mob broke people's legs was because they didn't want them dead. They wanted them to keep paying the VIG, as they called it, right? The debt service on their loan shark debt. I think this is the same way. There's a lot of people, including Iran, including China, a lot of people are counting on Biden to keep doing what he does. So they're going to make sure he's safe. They're going to make sure he's sound. They're going to run the interference and protect the guy. Because as long as he's in place, their agendas continue to run smoothly. It's really that simple. Just think, if you have the ability to keep Biden safe and secure, would you do it if you knew he was going to make sure that drag queens keep reading to little kids in kindergarten? If you knew that he was going to continue to destroy the American dollar by inflating our currency, right? Then China's going to say, hey, look, we got this guy's back. If you knew that he was going to continue to delay every shipment of arms to Hamas, then you're probably thinking, you know what? I like this guy if you're Iran. Let's see. If you know that he's going to continue to give unending amounts of cash to Ukraine, then Zelensky and that crew, they love him too. So I think a lot of people have a reason for Biden to be alive, and that's why he is where he is. And they use all of their power, all of their leverage in the media to make sure that he's painted with the best brush possible and looks fantastic when he's able to be out there. We learned earlier this week, I think it was Tuesday night, that their new strategy is to have him do a lot less talking on everything, right? They just don't want Biden out there because they're realizing the longer he's out there, the worse it gets for them. So I think those are some of the things that happen. I do not think that they're going to kill Biden. I think Biden may voluntarily resign. That might happen. And say, this is it, I'm done, I don't feel well. Maybe that could happen. But I don't think he's going anywhere. I could be wrong, though. We'll revisit if it happens. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate the call. KNSI. Folks are coming back. The rest of your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back, familia. We continue with your discussion on the news of the day. And we've got calls from all over: Idaho, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Maryland, New Mexico. We're going to go right now to Maryland, WXDE, and check in with Brendan. Go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Yes, hello. Having grown up with liberals my whole life, but being a conservative, I think that America is really two societies that, apart from occasional outliers, will not be able to mesh forever, and that the only way out of this is either secession or war. Maybe I'm a broken record, but that's what I think.
I wish you had a little more time. I'll give you my response on the way out. But all I'll say is, when I go to the car wash, I never think, is this guy a conservative or a liberal? It just never occurs to me. I think we coexist so well on so many levels. And I think that just sometimes we do a little bit too much thinking. But I do get it. There is a lot of a little angst in the world. Brendan, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. Folks, coming right back. It's Valdez, Hour 2, coming up.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to hour number 3. I said hour number 2 earlier. It's hour number 3. Open Phone America is what we call it around here. 833-4825-337 is the phone number, 833-4-VALDEZ. And looking forward to having a discussion with you this evening on lots of things. One of the things that's out there tonight, and we've been talking about it a little bit, is that Trump is viewed as less of a threat to democracy than his opponent, Joe El Baboso Biden. Now, Joe El Baboso Biden is the subject of a new poll with independents, and these independents are shocked, right? Well, I should say the media is shocked about the independents, saying that he is a bigger threat. This latest is from PBS, NPR, and Marist, and they found that 53% of independents believe that Biden's second term will weaken America, while only 42% believe that second Trump presidency would further harm democracy. Now, this is a big deal, in my opinion, because you've got the media, CNN, fact-checking Biden, as we just heard in the last hour, where he was saying inflation was at 9%, folks. No, it was not. It was not at 9%, folks. It was 1.4%, and they called him out on that. Then you had that interview with Erin Burnett that we played a couple of nights ago, and that was very good. I mean, I think she really called him out on that, and I think that one's, we have 2 clips of that. I think I'm going to use that again just to set the stage again, because I feel like Biden was groveling in that interview, and then he went on to blame everything on corporate greed. Maybe I'll replay that at the bottom of the hour. But it's just shocking to me how we end up in this situation. And there is another clip that I wanted to play, which is, let me see. No, not 13. There was one more that we hadn't used yet. Let me see. This is it. This is a take from Senator Ted Cruz that has nothing to do with the poll, but has everything to do with what Biden's been doing for the last 3 years. Listen to this.
For 3.5 years, Joe Biden and the Democrats have undermined and weakened our friends and allies, and they have sent billions of dollars to our enemies. It is exactly opposite what you would be doing if you were actually focused on U.S. national security interests. Let's look at our enemies. Tragically, Joe Biden has been the greatest friend the Ayatollah Khamenei has ever had on planet Earth. Tragically, Joe Biden has been the greatest friend to Hamas and Hezbollah that there is on planet Earth. Now, those sound like extraordinary statements. What are the facts? Under the Biden presidency, this administration has flowed more than $100 billion into Iran. $6 billion in ransom for 5 Americans, a policy which many of us said at the time would only lead to more Americans being taken hostage, and we saw tragically on October 7th that proved exactly right. $10 billion in funds in Iraq that the Biden administration wanted to flow to the Ayatollah, and then over $80 billion in oil.
Ted Cruz hitting the nail on the head right there. Super friendly to our worst enemies. That's the problem. Instead of being super friendly to America First policies, putting your family first, putting my family first, putting the needs of this nation before the needs of the Ayatollah, before the needs of Hamas, before the needs of any one of our countless enemies or the enemies of our allies, Joe Biden has failed us time and time again. And here we are. So no wonder Americans believe that a second Biden presidency would be a threat to democracy much more than one by Trump. Makes all the sense in the world to me. Anyway, I want to get some of your thoughts on this stuff. Let us go to the phones. Let's go to Jim, Las Cruces, New Mexico, KOBE. Go right ahead, Jim.
Hi, Rich. I blundered today into a pro-Hamas thing at the ROTC building on the State University of New Mexico campus.
Were they kind to you?
No, well, I kept my distance. I wanted to yell things like, "Those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed." But I didn't want to get beaten up, so I didn't do anything. Anyway, but I wish I had a lawn chair and some popcorn, because I enjoyed watching them get arrested. Some of them, when they get arrested, they don't go into that police cruiser, quietly. So it was cathartic.
Yeah. So you saw a few guys get roughed up? Is that what you're saying?
Well, they do. You don't have to rough them up. You just have to slap them, put some handcuffs on them, and they go crazy. They yell and they scream, and like they're being tortured.
Oh,
and they're
I
not.
see. A little accountability messes them up.
But at first, there was just one campus police car. Said that guy's not going to do anything, and then I started thinking, where are the city police? And then all of a sudden, the state police showed up, and they don't mess around. This is a blue state, but they must have been given the green light to do what they want to do, because they didn't. It wasn't long before people were getting handcuffs, and they were before the police showed up. They were very obnoxious. Now, some are more obnoxious than others, but they were kicking the plate glass. If that plate glass broke, it would break like knives. I guess plate glass doesn't do that anymore. But old-fashioned plate glass, they would be knives of glass falling on top of it.
Oh, you mean so once they were put in the back seat of the police car, they were trying to kick out the back windows?
No, they were trying to kick in the plate glass windows on the building of the ROTC building.
Oh, wow.
So,
wow,
and
how's that
there was this one old lady who should know better. She was the most obnoxious of all of them, and she was one of the few ones that wasn't wearing a mask. I guess they were all afraid of getting COVID, because they were all wearing COVID masks, every one of them.
I doubt it has anything to do with that.
Except for her. And she was the most obnoxious, and she started kicking the window. And she should know better. She's almost my age. And,
wow.
When they arrested her, she acted like, this can't be happening to me. Don't you know who I am? So anyway, that was enjoyable. I wish I had some popcorn and I could watch it from across the street.
Yeah, and a soft drink to enjoy the show, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate the call. Big shout out to Jim in Las Cruces, New Mexico, KOBE. And we're going to continue with the rest of your calls and more straight ahead. Wisconsin, Idaho, Pennsylvania, and more coming in. The phone number is 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. Amigos, we continue our conversation. You heard the number 833-4-VALDEZ. And before we go on, I want to share a couple of stories with you because, if I don't do these things, I forget them. I just keep talking. I love the conversation with the callers, and then everything falls by the wayside. Listen to this. A man was arrested for leaving his granddaughter with a homeless woman just so he could go drinking. I mean, is that nuts or what? Who does that? Right? Jason Warren told deputies he gave a homeless woman $20 to take care of his granddaughter at a thrift store while he went to a bar. Unbelievable. This guy's in California. He was arrested Monday on suspicion of child endangerment after leaving the little girl with the woman to go drink. The Sacramento County Sheriff's Office said around 7:45 that deputies responded to a parking lot near the bar. A caller reported a man was asking people for help because his 7-year-old granddaughter had been kidnapped for human trafficking. Now, the deputies arrived. The man later identified as Jason Warren, highly intoxicated. Warren told deputies he gave a homeless woman $20 to take his granddaughter to a thrift store while he went to the bar. And the sheriff's office said that he was at the bar for about 4 hours. Deputies found surveillance video of a woman, Lauren Jope, who was leaving with the child. About a half hour into the search, the woman heard the announcements from the sheriff's helicopter and brought the child back to the parking lot. Thank God. After we'd gotten something to eat, we walked back up the hill, and all of a sudden the helicopter's going around, and there was a tension on the ground, the lady said, and she said she heard something that described her. She confirmed with deputies that Warren gave her $20 to take the girl to the thrift store. She said, I was just walking down the street, and this car looked like it was out of gas, and I was just kind of walking into the parking lot. He said, hey, can you watch my, or can I guess he was saying, can you watch my car? Can you take my daughter in to buy a pair of shorts? Sounds like she's drunk too, the way this is written. Anyway, there it goes. She was also intoxicated and didn't think that he could take care of a child. Oh my gosh, the blind leading the blind. So she took care. Where is this kid's mom and dad? That's what I want to know. Why are they leaving the kid with drunk grandpa? Man, gives new meaning to the term bad grandpa. Anyway, Mr. Warren was arrested, and he's being accused of felony child endangerment. He was held on $75,000 bail, and it would be better for him if he was in New York. He'd be right out. And the drunk woman who had the child, she said, I'm glad I was walking where I was, because if I didn't hear the helicopter, I wouldn't have known. And that's just crazy. Anyway, so I want to know, what are some of your crazy stories from being drunk? Have you ever taken somebody's kid for $20 to the store? I doubt you have, but if you have, I'd love to hear the craziest thing you've done while you're drunk. And I want to get back to these calls on all the other topics we've been discussing tonight. Let's hit the phones. Where do we go? We go to La Crosse, Wisconsin. Check in with Nick. Go right ahead, Nick.
Hey, Rich. Great to talk to you. My question is, who do you think Donald Trump should beg for beep?
I like Byron Donalds. I don't think it happens because he's from Florida also, and he's in Congress, and he's a great fighter in Congress. But I would just love to see a Vice President Byron Donalds. I think he's just so good at handling the rhetoric and the media, and he tells it like it is. He's a straight shooter. He's a smart guy. He's very fast on his feet. I would love to see him be Vice President. I think he would blow away Kamala Harris in any type of debate. And I think he's a solid backup to President Trump. Like I said, I don't think the congressman from Florida is ever going to get picked, but he's probably who I would opt for.
Okay. I appreciate
How about you
talking to me. I like Tim Scott, and I like Greg Abbott. I like them both. What do you think?
Yeah, well, listen, I like Tim Scott. I mean, there's a couple of issues I remember a few years back that I felt like he might have been a little wishy-washy on. But outside of that, I think he's a heck of a nice guy. And the other one, you said Tim Scott and Greg Abbott. I didn't even know Greg Abbott was even interested in this position. So that's a first for me. But again, we're being hypothetical here, so that's fine. Yeah, I think Greg Abbott has shown a lot of leadership, and he's been great on the border issue, and that's really all I know. I have never talked to Greg Abbott before, so I really couldn't go much into that. But I think either one of those guys would be great. I think the key for Trump is you got to find somebody whose ego is not as big as Trump's, so that, they always realize that they're, the number two person. And I think oftentimes in politics, the people that we like are the people that have the big egos. And that's why I think so many people were like, I would love to see DeSantis be Trump's VP pick. I don't think in a million years that would ever happen, because I just think they both have such large, I don't want to even say ego because that might have a negative connotation, but just a very serious sense of their own self-worth and importance. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's a good thing for the work that they do. I think you need that. right? Imagine having somebody like, I don't know, a superstar athlete that didn't walk on the field thinking, man, I'm the man, I'm about to crush this. You know, you don't want somebody going out there that's kind of fearful and weak. So I understand that. And I think, you know, any one of those would be great. There's been some rumors about Tulsi Gabbard, who was recently on this show, and she said that she would be happy to serve if asked. There was some talk about Kristi Noem. Then there wasn't talk about Kristi Noem, the governor in one of the Dakotas. So I don't know. I don't know about Kristi Noem. I know that the people took exception to something she wrote in her book about a dog. And I think that, you know, the fact that we're still talking about that, and it came to light a couple of days ago, is indicative of maybe that's the candidate, right? Maybe that is exactly who the folks are thinking of picking, you know, or on the short list somehow, because she might, in fact, bring everything that Trump needs to the table. I think the key is having the ability to kind of disappear into the background most of the time and to rise to the challenge and own the stage when it's your turn, when it's your job. And I think Mike Pence was really good at that, especially with his COVID response. I don't know that everybody has that ability. I think sometimes some people perform better on their own as a solo act, and that's okay too. Anyway, that's my thought there, Nick. Thank you for the call. I appreciate it. Let me see. Where do we go here? Paul, Boise, Idaho, KBOI. Go right ahead.
Thanks for taking my call, Rich.
Yes, sir.
One thing I wanted to discuss was the protesters. They had a familiar name to the donor, and that was Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which I think the total was $600,000 that they donated to the protesters of one of the colleges down in Southern California, I believe. And you know, it goes to show you that you kind of think you'd like to get to know somebody, you know, from a distance, like Gates. Maybe he'd be a decent guy, but you know, he's the guy that doesn't want us to eat meat and eat bugs.
Right.
And he's also the guy that had the frequent flyer mileage to Pedophile Island. So, you know, he had his own.
Hey, Bill, I'm going to put you on hold. I'm sorry, Paul, I'm going to put you on hold because we're getting a lot of interference on your line. But you're right. I think that Bill Gates is off his rocker most of the time. He's got this air of superiority about him where he thinks that he's here to take over the world, right? And that's just kind of his job. It's almost like Klaus Schwab-esque, if you will. So we'll continue our discussion with you all on Open Phone America straight ahead. Phone number 833-482-5337. Make sure you're streaming this program. If the station that you listen to locally decides to play the local game or to preempt the show for whatever reason, you can always listen live right through your cell phone. Just go to richvaldez.com and click the Listen Live button. You'll never miss a show. Plus, all our shows are archived at richvaldez.com. All right, folks, we're coming right back. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
So when you talk about the economy, of course, it is by far the most important issue for voters. It's also true right now, Mr. President, that voters by a wide margin trust Trump more on the economy. They say that in polls. And part of the reason for that may be the numbers. And you're aware of many of these, of course. The cost of buying a home in the United States is double what it was when you look at your monthly costs from before the pandemic. Real income, when you account for inflation, is actually down since you took office. Economic growth last week, far short of expectations. Consumer confidence, maybe no surprise, is near a 2-year low. With less than 6 months to go to Election Day, are you worried that you're running out of time to turn that around?
we've already turned it around. Look at the Michigan survey. For 65% of the American people think they're in good shape economically. They think the nation's not in good shape, but they're personally in good shape. The polling data has been wrong all along. How many, you guys do a poll at CNN, how many folks you have to call to get one response? The idea that we're in a situation where things are so bad, the folks, we've created more jobs. We're in a situation where people have access to good paying jobs. And the last I saw, the combination of the inflation, the cost of inflation, all those things, that's really worrisome to people with good reason. That's why I'm working very hard to bring the cost of rentals down, to increase the number of homes that are available.
To bring the cost of rentals down, Biden says. Of course, that's Joel Baboso Biden on with Aaron Burnett on CNN. And what I find remarkable about this is he says we're going to bring the price of rentals down. How does the government control the price of a rental? How does the government control what you're going to pay for rent? Because let me ask you, I've never had the government let me know that I should be paying this or paying that. So obviously what he means is a government program, some sort of handout, another way to help people. Now, I understand there's a Section 8 program, a housing program that people take advantage of and certain people have to qualify for. I've known people personally that have qualified for this and needed it, people that were disabled and needed that type of support. But to just make blanket statements like he is, and that's what he's doing. He's trying to say, look, if you're just an everyday working American, we're going to try and bring your... Why is that the government's job? And why is it not the government's job just to spend a little bit less money, right? Stop printing and spending money like a madman and creating inflation, and maybe we'd all be better off. How about that, Joel Baboso Biden? But no, he says, no, it's not inflation. It's not shrinkflation. No, it's actually corporate greed. Listen to this.
What about, but there's real pain. Grocery prices are up 30%, more than 30%. Since the beginning of the pandemic, and people are spending more on food and groceries than they have at any time really in the past 30 years. That's a real day-to-day pain that people feel.
It really is, and it's real. But the fact is that if you take a look at what the people have, they have the money to spend. It angers them and angers me that you have to spend more. For example, the whole idea of this notion that Senator Casey talked about, shrinkflation. I think it's on your
same
program.
Price for a smaller bottle of juice or something.
For example, Snickers bar, they did a thing, and it's like 20% less for the same price. That's corporate greed. That's corporate greed, and we've got to deal with it, and that's what I'm working on.
It's corporate greed, folks. They just woke up one day and said, you know what? We're going to give you a smaller Snickers bar. We're going to put more air and less chips. We're going to do... Now, listen, they could do that at any time in the history of life. Why did they choose to do it at the time where potatoes cost more, oil costs more, everything costs more to make the potato chip? Obviously, they're doing it because they have to, right? They don't want to pass the increased expense on to you. They want to protect their profit margin. I would do the same thing. If you're forced with selling a potato chip with 15 chips in it versus one that has 11 chips in it, I'm probably going to do the same thing and offer 11 chips. Or create an option that's maybe slightly bigger that has, 20 chips and say, oh, we got our new bonus size, whatever. But you have to you have to be real. At the end of the day, nothing is free, right? The potatoes have to be grown, they have to be sliced, they have to be fried. You can't make potato chips without that process, and you need the ingredients and the facility to go along with it. And you got to pay for all of that. And that's the part where I feel like it's not corporate greed. And it doesn't mean corporations aren't greedy. Maybe they are. But this is not a good example of that. This is a perfect example of Joel Baboso Biden, his reckless spending, or what some people like to say, it's a controlled demolition. All right, then maybe it's that. Maybe it's not reckless spending. Maybe it's well-planned spending designed to ruin America. However you want to look at this situation, that's the end result. We are hurting our country. We are hurting our currency. We are hurting our people. That has to stop. Let us go to your calls. Let me see. Oh, we have some more VP picks. That's fun. I like that. We've got some Biden. We have some Trump. We have, what else do we have here? Let's go to Damon calling us from Chicago on WGN. Go right ahead.
Hello, Rich. First of all, I really enjoy your show just about every evening. Thanks
you,
very
sir.
much for all you do. Both my wife and I. But what I want to say is I was thinking of Candace Owens to go with Mr. Trump for a variety of reasons. Female vote for a VP for running mate for Candace Owens, for her to be female, for her to be African American, for her to reach more minorities, period. And she's extremely intelligent, and I really enjoy listening to her, like on YouTube and whenever she's on the TV.
Yeah, I think Candace Owens is terrific, and I have not thought of her in that position of vice president, but let me tell you, when you look at the status quo, I think she would blow away Kamala Harris. And if in a face-to-face matchup like Trump v. Biden, Owens versus Kamala Harris, as I like to call her, I think she destroys her. And that's great. She's a very articulate woman that's really well-versed on the issues. Few can break things down the way she does. And I think she has a remarkable background and story to go along with it. So I have no disagreement there. I don't think I would take any umbrage or exception to that. I think, again, the vice president is a largely ceremonial role, and someone like Candace Owens is way more capable than of that role. However, I do think Trump used the vice presidency differently than most people, where he allowed them to kind of come out of their shell a little bit, right? If you remember, he allowed Mike Pompeo to be kind of in charge of COVID and really let him run the press conference and do all of those things. I didn't hear anything. What did you say? So, Mike Pence, excuse me. What did I say? Oh, Mike Pompeo, forgive me. Yeah, no, Mike Pompeo. I meant Mike Pence, excuse me. And yes, so I think in that regard, I think she'd be allowed to flourish in that capacity. I think a very good pick, very, very solid pick, way better than what we're seeing on the left. Damon in Chicago, Illinois, listening on WGN. Thank you for the call and your kind words. I salute you and your wife. Keep listening, and I appreciate it. Let's continue. Let's go to do one more. John, Rolla, Missouri. Is that Missouri? Yeah, right? KTTR. Go right ahead.
Yeah, well, you named the name that would be my choice, Mike Pompeo. He already has foreign affairs where he could alleviate Trump, where Trump could concentrate more on just the U.S. And as you say, he would let his VP become more dominant in some field. Well, Mike Pence has the expertise with foreign policy.
Mike Pompeo.
He could Mike Pompeo. And then he could pick another person for Secretary of State, and Mike Pompeo and the new Secretary of State could work together and hopefully start calming the world down, starting with the Middle East.
Listen, I think that's great, John. I have, again, no disagreement there either. I think there's so many ways you could slice this, right? There's so many reasons to bring in a former CIA director, a former Secretary of State, somebody who understands Washington, knows Washington. He's a former congressman as well, knows the players. That, to me, is a huge advantage. The previous caller mentioned Ms. Owens. I think another one. You are able to tap right into some of the minorities that are growing in their support of these policies. And it's another great way to go. There's so many ways to do this. And I think the reason there's so many options here is because the policies are sound, right? So you don't need this silver bullet magic person to pull it off. What you need is just a good set of rules, a good policy plan to bring things to fruition, and then that's it. And that's why I think, Trump could pick anybody and really be successful, because largely he's a one-man show. And when you put a very capable person next to a one-man show, it sounds like a recipe for being unstoppable. Thank you, John and Rolla, for the call. KTTR, big shout out to you all. Folks, are going to pause right here, coming right back for the first of 2 rounds of the speed round. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. voted best head of hair in live late night radio 6 years in a row. It's Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. And again, just one of these stories I want to share with you. A drunk middle school teacher, a teaching assistant rather, was arrested after a student drank her vodka, thinking it was Mountain Dew. That's a report according to the police. This happened in Georgia. A teaching assistant in a middle school was arrested and fired after a student drank her bottle of vodka, thinking it was Mountain Dew. Her blood alcohol level was sitting at 3 times the legal limit. Her name is Alexandra Nicole Lambert, 39 years old. Not the prettiest. I'm looking at her mugshot here. But then again, mugshots are not always very fair. But she was fired from the Morgan City middle school, after this student took a swig out of a bottle that allegedly belonged to her, thinking it was just Mountain Dew. Meanwhile, she was actually getting drunk on the job. The student threw the drink out and alerted another teacher, who brought the matter to the principal's office that afternoon. Lambert admitted to the bottle and said it was filled with vodka, claims she brought it to school accidentally. And I guess she happened to accidentally drink it as well, given that they gave her a breathalyzer and her blood came back at 0.259, which is 3 times the legal limit. So, wow. There's that one. And I've heard about teachers drinking for a long time. I didn't know they were drinking on the job. I thought they were drinking after, oh man, what a day. I thought that was how it kind of went. Crazy stuff. Anyway, let's get to your calls. Let me see. I want to go to, there was somebody here that was hanging on. Let's see. Can Trump participate? We're going to get to that right now. Let's go to Bruce, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, KDKA. Go right ahead.
Yeah, how you doing, Rich? It's this corporate greed thing. It's all about the corporate greed. It isn't the main factor in the inflation. There's a lot of different variables that are going to dictate what the inflation is going to be, okay?
What are the different variables that dictate inflation, Bruce?
You're right, but a lot of it, when it comes to corporate greed...
No, I'm asking you, what are these different factors?
I'm not an economist, okay? I just go back...
I'll tell you, there's not a lot of different factors. There's one, government spending.
Well, okay, then fine, let's talk about government spending. Under Republicans, the government, they'd love to say Biden and his spending's outrageous, but under Trump, $8 trillion...
No, that's not true. That's not true. Biden has spent $6 trillion and now is on track to spend a lot more. Trump had $2 trillion during COVID, which was, again, I'm not trying to give him a pass, but at least he spent his during the time that the country was shut down and trying to mass produce a vaccine and, ships going into New York Harbor and all of that, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't agree with the spending in either case, but at least in one of them, it was actively during the pandemic. Biden comes in and says, we're going to do the American Rescue Plan, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and spends all of this money, 3 times what Trump spent in 4 years. Biden spent 3 times that amount in something like a year. And that's remarkable spending. And there's no way to prevent inflation if you do that. It's guaranteed. That kind of spending is always going to lead to inflation. It inflates the value of the dollar and causes the problems we have. So this is why now when people go to the grocery store, and we got even CNN admitting it, you've got 30% increase on prices just because they say inflation is at 14% or whatever it is, 9%. That doesn't mean that you're not paying close to 40% of an increase on food. And I think that's what most people are paying. And when you're just imagine that, and I'm sure you have to deal with it as well as everybody else. But when you're spending, I don't know, if you spent, $10 on a steak before, and now you're spending, an additional 40%, so $14 on a steak, that's got to hurt the pocket, no, Bruce?
Was put into by the Republicans.
What's that?
You got that?
No, say it again.
I said The Democrats always have to come in and bail the country out after the Republicans spend us into some type of deficit, some type of crisis.
But, it's nice that you say that, but that's like me saying to you, you're a 7-foot red-haired giant. And that may not necessarily be true, right? When is it that the Republicans have spent us into something that the Democrats have saved us from? Ever.
If you look at the facts and go back and see.
I'm looking at the facts. I'm 46 years old. Hold on a second. Take a breath. Let's go back to Jimmy Carter, right? It seems to me that Ronald Reagan came in and bailed out the Carter administration for the horrible job they did. Very similar to what Biden's doing now, super friendly towards Iran, right? They had hostages of ours. Voila. Reagan gets elected, they say, okay, you can have back your hostages. They weren't playing games with him, right? We had inflation back then, 21% interest rates and whatnot, all this craziness with the gas. All of that changed in Reagan. People made money and things got better. So you give me the example of when Democrats made things better after Republicans broke them.
But look at when Obama came in and had to pick up where Bush put us on that cliff where our country almost went over that cliff.
Again, I don't remember that cliff either. I guess we're living a different history, but things weren't that bad. I think for me, the Great Recession is directly related to the Obama administration. But we could argue about that another day. Bruce, thanks for the call. KDKA, shout out to you guys. Coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, folks, I wanted to play Michael Rappaport, but I don't have enough time. But he basically says that Biden is an effing, I think moron is the word he uses, at the end of it for reneging his support on Israel with respect to their final move into Rafah. But I want to go into the speed round. There's not a lot of time. And I also want to say I do recognize and disagree with the idea of too big to fail. And I think that George W. Bush's bailout of AIG was not a good idea with respect to the last caller. So if that's a point of me conceding or agreeing with you, take it as what it is. I think Bush was wrong to do that. All right, let us move forward. Paul in Zanesville, WHIZ, quickly, go right ahead.
Yeah, here we have Biden, a career politician. You know, I wonder when the last time he went and shopped for his own groceries and his own gas. Okay, and that kind of baffles me because it does. But now, one thing I wanted to ask you real quick, Rich, was I had a question, and I don't know the answer to this. What? Trump's under a gag order. Would he be able to debate Joe Biden? You know, being under a gag order, because I think it'd be awful tough for him.
Yeah. Here's the thing, Paul, as far as I know it, Trump is ideally allowed to do everything the rest of us are allowed to do without mentioning witnesses or the case that he's involved in, which in and of itself is unconstitutional because then he can't defend himself. But yes, he should be able to debate as long as Biden doesn't try to trick him into talking about witnesses, which is tricky in and of itself. Hasta la próxima. Take care. Good night and God bless. I am Rich Valdez. We'll do it again tomorrow, God willing.